So a body may pass away, but the relationship continues.
Yes.
And so when we've lost our babies, we still have that relationship with that child. Whether or not the child is inside our body or not doesn't matter. That soul made a connection. So that relationship is continuing. And I remind people of that because, in the Rudolf Steiner world, the Waldorf world, they teach a bereavement path where you just continue to talk to the spirit of the person as if that person is still there and don't even worry about it. One man, to manage his grief after 25 years, continued to read at night to his daughter in her room, whether she was there or not in the physical form or corporeal form did not matter. He was continuing to do the reading. That was a ritual of healing for him.
Hello, hello, beautiful soul sisters and you.
No, Amana.
I'm so happy that you're here. This is a space where we remember what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth, exploring that which is often unseen and unspoken. Together, we practice using our voices and the ancient ritual of storytelling, connecting about all that unites us as we share our stories of birth, life, and death. Today is Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. It's a little after 1:30 p.m. The moon is currently waning after the full moon in Scorpio that just happened yesterday. I'm currently in Western Washington in a beautiful little Airbnb, and I will be heading up to Canada this weekend with my family and then over to the east side of the state. If you would like to see our faces today, you can tune in on Earthing Nova YouTube. I am thrilled to have Dr. Leslie Shore here today through the cosmos on Zoom. I connected with her through Zenith Virago and hope to meet her in the flesh this August during a Deathwalker training in Olympia, Washington, with Zenith as well. And I'll share details on that training as we wrap up for those of you that will be interested in joining along, and also a link in the show notes. So Leslie, would you please take a moment and just introduce yourself further in whatever way feels good to you today before we move into the rest of our time together?
Sure. So I've been working in the end-of-life world for about 25 years on the ground running. But as a child, I was called to death because my mother was very, very ill and was repeatedly throughout my life. When she died 2 years ago, my cousin and I counted that that was her 9th attempt. She was a real cat lover, and we always teased that someday she'd cross over on that 9th time, and she actually did, and that was 2 years ago. So I grew up in an anticipatory grief reality, in truth, in the 60s in a tiny timber town under Mount Rainier. And so she'd been misdiagnosed by our local doctor repeatedly, and then by other city doctors too. And so at age 9, 10, and 11, I was her caregiver. And one of the times she was near death, she was very close. And my father gave me the lecture, and I went to the grave of my great-grandmother, and I prayed and said, hey, I'm comfortable with death. I've been comfortable with death my whole life. Maybe I'm only 10, but I'm a good helper. I can really help you. And if you will spare my mom's life, then I'll help you in death anytime I can. Mm-hmm. And then I got back to the house and she was rallying. But I wanted to share a quick anecdote that's true about what happened when I did that little prayer. I was in a really old, crumbly, pioneer cemetery, really, that also included Japanese graves from the mill worker community that was eventually relocated due to World War II and the internment process. I frequently spent time with these children's graves as well. And so I'd been there first and then at my great-grandmother's. But when I said I would be a helper, then things started to shift. It was sort of end of spring or maybe early summer. And I could feel this warm wind come around like it was wrapping around my body. Then I saw blossoms flying around like cherry and plum blossoms, and then one white butterfly that followed me throughout the cemetery. But during that moment, I never felt alone again. Never felt alone again. And I believe that it was a spiritual connection that happened at that moment, that the sacred and numinosity of Mother Earth was there and present at that moment, and that I was not alone. And from that point on, I really did serve death. I created a pet memorial park for my friends whose parents would not let them bury their dogs on property, or one who lived in an apartment and had no property. So that was the beginning of my sojourn into death work. Wow. And so, yeah, it's been a long, long, long number of decades to be in service.
Yes. So. Can you share a little bit? I know you called yourself a grief guardian. Like, what does that mean to you, and how has that expressed itself over the years?
One way that I became a grief guardian was just experiencing the kind of shaming that occurs for grievers in the United States of America. This is a death-phobic nation, and every day that a doula or end-of-life midwife or death educator or consultant or hospice nurse or hospice doctor is working with all of us out in a larger populace, they're sharing the messaging around death and dying and how beautiful it really can be for those of us who are in the work at the bedside and really serving families and people. But what happened in 1985, so part of my background is that I was in the news business really early on. My mother was also an editor of our local hometown newspaper, which I eventually bought many decades later. But anyway, my best friend was killed on a story, and I was there. And I was one of a handful of the reporters who experienced it and were there immediately after the chopper crash, which killed him and the pilot. And he was supposed to be the best man in my wedding. And I was the one tasked with going to the house to tell his wife and daughter, 5-year-old daughter, whose name was Leslie. I had to tell them what happened that morning. Now, his name was Gary Brown, and he was the chief photographer of Creme Television, which was the CBS affiliate in Spokane, Washington, at the time, the second largest city in Washington. And so, while all of the pieces were flying everywhere and we were trying to figure out what happened, how it happened, during that time, I was trying to work with the grievers, because all of us in the newsroom were grieving. Mm-hmm. Not only were we grieving because we had lost our friend and colleague and a beautiful man, entirely beautiful man for everyone who knew him. It was not only that, but it was, I knew that people needed to grieve in a healthy way, right? Well, so I started laying flowers on the spot where Gary was killed, and he was killed in the helipad behind the station. There was no way we could escape that mark where all the burning had occurred. No way. Mm-hmm. So then I was brought to the general manager, who said, you can't keep drumming up these memories anymore. Stop that. But the real reason they did it is that they were in the middle of litigation already. And so my number one gripe about American death and dying and grieving is that most Americans jump right into litigation. They sue each other instead of managing their grief. They become weaponized instead of embracing. This is what happens when people don't have a soul relationship with death, but see death only as a windfall financially.
Yes. And how did you develop a soul relationship with death?
I embraced death and welcomed death into my life. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm going to be a death-aware person. And I became a grief guardian because of that experience. And even just 2 summers ago, when I was at home in my hometown, there's a big community gathering, and I was helping and supporting an old friend who lost her son after years of leukemia treatment. And she was really emoting and being honest about what she was going through. And the door flew open and somebody else ran into the room and said, "Why are you making her cry?" So that's where we're at in America. We're in this place where some of us who are highly aware and really working hard to bring death into a more natural, honest awareness, we're working against those who want to shut us down because they don't know how to grieve and are uncomfortable with emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, that was my experience too, of people being uncomfortable with like their own grief or with my grief and wanting to shut it down.
Right.
For me, my big like initiation into death was when I was 25 years old, and my first love, he was 26 and he died of cancer. And I got to be, right there. I was right there with him and witnessed his last breaths. And for me, it was just like, yeah, a huge, big experience in my 20s. It was most of my peers couldn't understand it. And like you're saying, we don't have the practices and the knowing of how to be with people in that time. So I did experience some of that, like shutting down then. Mm-hmm.
Well, because America doesn't have a really healthy cultural framework around death and dying, this is why we work so hard to educate, to bring people into awareness, preparedness, consciousness. So I really had, and you had, death consciousness early in our lifetime. Also, one of my best friends, actually, when I was in high school, was fighting leukemia and beat it, and later was murdered before her 30th birthday. So, so I was her support person a bit when she was in high school, though she had this incredible mother who was also a beautiful friend and an incredible seer of things. But, so there she was in that period of her life. And then there I was with her mother after her murder, trying to make sense of it all, And we need spaciousness in our nation to be able to have these discussions and not to be shamed by them in public, because it counters our productivity.
Yeah, I feel like they need to be brought into the light, not shoved down into the dark.
Right.
Yes. So you studied ritual in your PhD program, and you spoke a little bit about ritual healing around end of life and how to involve that and why it's important. I would love for you to share more about that here.
So one of the things that I did right before COVID hit was speak at the University of Bath on ancient ritual as a remedy in today's bereavement. Now, when we look at ritual, we can look at a variety of religious spaces, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Catholicism. We know these rituals exist pretty well in our framework in America, right? In Old Latin and Old Latin masses, it was full on incense, all of it. There was movement. There was a physical trail where you walked up, you took the host in your mouth, and then you went on with more prayer. All of that physical integration is actually part of what makes ritual work. We have in the back of our heads, we've got these two little amazing organs that are called the amygdala. And they're just little almonds, right? And they're part of the older part of the brain. Well, they respond directly to ritual healing. So we're all wired for ritual, actually, and for ritual healing.
Amazing.
It is amazing. And Harvard Business School, of all people, you don't always think of them as the most spiritually driven folk or the most soulfully driven folk or psychologically driven even, but they kind of are. And they did this long study a couple of years back about how ritual works in healing after loss. And that could be not only the loss of your best friend or your dog that's lived 20 years, or, it could be any of these things, or it could be loss of a marriage, loss of a job, loss of a house, could be any of those things. And so what they did was they created and crafted little ritual scenarios. Let's say you came to me and you said, "Hey, I lost my job. And so we might write down a little bit of the intentions, like on a piece of paper, like, I feel this way. I feel like all of my hard work went for nothing. I feel like what I could predict was not actually predictable. I feel now I'm worried about my family or myself or whatever it might be, however you may be impacted by that job loss. So what the researchers found was that when they took those scraps of paper and burned them, then people had a sense of control over that experience in that moment and that loss. It gave them an integrative concept that's somatic, maybe spiritual, but if not soulful, maybe psychological, might even be social. Whatever it is, these amygdalae actually will light up when we're in the middle of ritual enactment. That includes physical. It includes a story or a rite. When people talk about rites and rituals, the rites are the written word. They're the sacred script, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then the ritual itself is a physicality. So it may very well be that we'll light a candle when we say someone's name in front of a picture frame. It might be in Zen Buddhism in Japan, when after someone dies, the priest has given that person a new name for the soul journey and evolution that then occurs. Mm-hmm. And that may be calligraphied on a beautiful wooden panel, which is put on a home family altar in memory. But it's not only memory, it's also tribute, because what that person, the descendants, are trying to do, being left behind, is to encourage that journey across the cosmos, wherever that soul needs to go. And you'll hear Zen Buddhists say, gosh, I lost my dad a couple of years ago. I wonder where he is now. They don't see him as lost in a grave or ashes or even, compost. What they see him as is a soul still finding its way. And that also is an openness that a lot of us in America don't feel outside of those channels.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said that at this time, sometimes death doulas or people in the death world think that they're creating ritual in the space, but they are only kind of creating the seed or a glimpse, but not in the totality. So what's the difference? Like, what does it look like to not be creating the full experience? And what does it look like to create the full experience that is more profound, that provides that more profound healing that you speak to?
Right. So an example is my niece, Cassandra, who died at the age of 31, I believe, of a genetic disease that eventually caused her to lose one organ at a time. And eventually she said to her family and her doctors, I'm done with this. I know what the end means for me. Now I need some control over this myself as a human being. And so one of the things that, and a lot of people who've been ill for a long time have this same kind of quest inside their heart, which is they'd like to sort of reclaim their body, have autonomy over their body after surgeons and treatments, and in some cases, people who are killed by the hand of another feel that same, the survivors will feel the same thing. They'll say, hey, we want this body to have some reclamation because this body was intruded upon, really, in life. And so what Cassandra and I did before her death, and this is a beautiful opportunity if people can have this, if they can know and meet with the person while they're ill and still have that time. So what we did was co-create Tahara, but she was a Jewish girl, but she was not a religious Jewish girl. So she wanted this body washing ritual to actually be about the earth and Shekinah, which is viewed as sort of the feminine aspect of the power of the architect of the universe, if you will. So, but it's more of a feminine or regenerative sort of earth-based concept in its own way, as many people have talked to me about. So what we did was I said to her, well, Cassandra, what we need is a transformative ritual. And that includes everything a human can do. So we wrote a song and verse and music. we wrote a ritual script for her body washing and her redressing prior to her journey leaving her home and her mother and her brother, my nephew, who's phenomenal. So when we talk about transformative ritual, we're not just talking about a candle or a crystal or, all of those things may be part of it, but that isn't really transformative ritual. It may be a blessing. It may be a grounding. It may bring breath to us. It may bring us into a healing space, but transformative ritual needs to go full circle. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, really. And that end is a release. It's a liberty. And when we have that, you see the healing kind of really quickly. And I would love it if sometime you met my sister-in-law, Cassandra's mom, and she can share with you how it felt for her prior to the ritual and after. Mm. Because what she said was after, going back in and seeing her beautiful daughter in this beautiful space, surrounded and shrouded with linens and cotton natural. Her flowers in her hair that she had handpicked before her death. Her washing bowl filled with petals and floating candles, all chosen prior to her death. All of the scents we use, the scented oils on her body, the candles in the room, chosen by her. She wanted rose, she wanted vanilla, she wanted lavender. She wanted pink petals and yellow petals. She was lesbian, so she wanted rainbow petals, all of which were in her bowl. So that when we were washing her, I was washing her in this case, I knew it was how she wanted to be washed and clothed prior to her next phase of her journey, And for Cassandra, it was so important to reclaim her body because she said, Aunt Leslie, they've done everything to me. I removed ports, batteries, electrical things that I'd never even known you could do in medicine prior to her, final voyage. And I think we did what she wanted. I felt good about it. Her mom and brother felt good about it, as did others who knew about the ritual. And I would love to share that with you, and I'll share the script and send it to you.
Yeah, I would be honored to know
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So in the song we said, Shekinah, you move the mountains. Shekinah, you bring the sun. We just had it really organic and just from our heart. Nobody needed to be a recording artist that day. We needed to sing her forward. And that's what.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You bet, love.
For people that might be listening and don't know about the end of life movement, I feel like you've mentioned it here. Can you tell people a little more about what the end of life movement is here in the US?
I will. I would be happy to. Thank you. So frequently you will hear people talk about it as the death positive movement. And it includes the idea that since death is our ultimate truth, why are we demonizing it in America? Why are we hiding from it? Why are we not granting employees bereavement leave? Why are we not allowing people to cry out of a burst of grief? Instead of, why are we shaming these people when what they're doing is healing? And we know that tears release a tremendous amount of toxins in the body. Mm-hmm. Tears are super healing. And we've got tears, and we've got this sort of ability in our bodies and brains, our big, beautiful brains, to be able to heal naturally. As long as people don't hiccup death with some craziness, right? So one of the things I battle on a daily basis is people who don't want us to be honest around our grieving and our emotional truth around death. And so the death positive movement is saying, hey, this is our ultimate truth. Why are we shaming people? Why aren't we actually managing this as a place of higher consciousness? And that movement is part of it. So you've got healers all over the place, creating beautiful groups and nonprofits to bring death awareness, but also preparedness and end of life consulting. The majority of end of life doulas and end of life midwives and death doulas do charge, and they deserve to make a living in this sacred work. They absolutely do. And I support them in every way to be able to create more of a professional space for people like us, who are called to this work because it's authentic and real and it's depth of soul. It's not shallow.
No.
It's real. Yeah.
So needed. So I know we spoke a little bit about how both of us have had babies in our womb that are not living here earthside, that are living. I still talk about, I call it like mid-mothering. Like I continue to mother my babies that are not earthside. Just the way that I mother them looks different than the way that I mother my ones that are living here. I wonder you would mind sharing some of your stories or a story about what that process was like for you.
It was hard. And, that's another place where I felt the need to be a grief guardian at a certain point. I was a television newscaster at the time, so I was on air and I was pregnant and everybody knew I was pregnant and everybody was waiting for the baby to be born. And I was last trimester. And then they found that, and then I was hemorrhaging on air. I started being on air and had to leave. We closed out the newscast and I was in the hospital. And what they found was I was losing the baby because she had a tremendous amount of birth defects. So then, I went on leave and we figured out what to do. And because she only had, I think, like half a brain and there was maybe part of a heart, but not. There were other organs that were perfect, but not enough to sustain life. And so they induced labor and I gave birth to her and she was born and died in my arms, and she had a beautiful smile on her face, beautiful smile. And I felt this deep grief for years, right? Until one day, about 5 years ago, I was coming out of the shower and all of a sudden, boom, I felt like something's changed. And I had a sense that she was back, that somebody had received her back, that her soul had come back. And I have felt that ever since. I have not felt sad anymore. But during that time, when I was a newscaster, a news anchor, and a news reporter, there, everyone knows you're pregnant and then you're not, right?
Yeah.
And so then I had to talk about it in public a little bit, but in the newsroom one day, a male news reporter, his wife had given birth to a child. She came in immediately after the death of my child and was showing her baby everywhere, which was beautiful. But what was interesting about it was one of my good friends who was a co-anchor said, "Hey, Leslie just went through this loss." And this woman said, unbelievably, it's time for her to get over it. Now, this was only 2 weeks into the grieving period, but that's how callous people in America can be when their ego has been inserted instead of compassion.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. No words.
People can do, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I know. I think, yeah. So much that could be said. What did you name your daughter?
Yes, I did. Well, her name was actually the two names of my living two children that I gave it. So I did name her. And, well, we had a whole nursery set up by that time, and I have a shadow box that I did for a birth loss exhibit in Arts Walk here locally. It was a letter to my daughter many years later, and, there were a number of big trucker guys crying reading that, because it was the only chance I'd had to say goodbye to her, really.
Yeah, I find that like when I work with other women and I experience this some myself was just the feeling of, I felt like such a responsibility as the mother to like carry the memory and to share it with people because to so many she was like invisible. Like my daughter Hartley, yes, I was pregnant with her and people knew I was pregnant, but because no one met her outside of my body, to some it was almost like she never, fully existed because she wasn't alive outside of me. So I found that to be, yeah, a challenge and interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. And the human animal is so fixated on what it can really see that frequently, we get tripped up by that. And then we lose our depth of understanding around it. But she's buried right next to my young aunt who died also young, as a young mother. And yeah, I visit her all the time. She's really close to where my best friend is interred with my mother. He died of AIDS in 92, and mom was with him when he died. And he, his last wishes were, I want to be interred with your mom when she dies. And so many years later, mom died 2 years ago. And so we finally interred them together, which I know they're really happy about. They adored each other. So,
Well, what do you feel people should know about death and maybe also grief? Maybe that's two separate things. Like, what do you feel like people should know that we don't know?
well, one of the first things that I try to remind people about death is that it is our soul path. It is our soul crossroads, really. It's
Mhm.
we have this chance to live this life, whether we live it in 5 minutes or 50 or 500, it doesn't matter. But this is a soul path. So when people are preparing for their death, I worked really, really closely with people to help them find their closure with their life, and maybe not closing out their life necessarily, but making amends, cleaning up the past, because it's my belief that the more you clean up before you die, the less you have to worry about on the next life cycle. But I
Mhm.
believe in the evolution of the soul, and everything I've witnessed at the bedside affirms that for me.
Yeah, I know. It's so interesting how, like, yeah, I've heard the phrase "we come to go," because
Yes,
no one
you.
doesn't leave, right? Like we all die, and yet we so much focus. We don't want to look at that or don't not acknowledge that we do go. And I'm so grateful that there's people like you in the world sharing this work and talking to people about death and bringing it into the light.
Thank you, honey. And your work too. Many of us in this work of the end of life and death and dying and bereavement, many of us are retired birth midwives who eventually decided to move out of the field. And now it's a reverse birth because they're now shepherding and accompanying and walking side by side, however you want to couch it, but they're now helping people return to
Mhm.
whatever it was they came from. And I
Mhm.
don't know what the great mystery is. I'm really comfortable with not knowing and be really super happy about it.
Yeah,
because
yeah, me too.
because I'm pretty sure it's really fascinating and cool.
Yeah.
And I don't believe we would have all of these sacred texts and all of these ancient belief systems around that space between life and death unless it was pretty cool,
Mhm.
unless it was pretty nifty.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I find also just conception and where people come from. That's also, where do we come from? Where do we go? Yeah, I love the mystery.
It's like the poet Reiki, talked about darkness, the darkness that he loved because it was that void prior to life and that void after death. Whatever that void is, Reiki was really interested in that void. And I guess I am too, kind of. So,
Yeah. Yes. For people who might be listening that have loved ones in their life that are grieving, or obviously they will at some point, like what are there a couple of things
yeah,
that you suggest to people in ways to support loved ones
yeah,
and yeah.
yeah. Absolutely. Depending on where the person is in the dying process, one of the most important things you can do with that person is make sure that that person's story and memory is going to be carried. So if the person is lucid enough, you can say to that person, hey, what is the number one thing you want me to carry for you in this life after you move on? And people know, they'll come right up with it. That's one beautiful thing. And also making sure that everybody's there at the bedside that needs to be, and those who are not healthy and who might be toxic are not prevented, or are actually prevented from being a part of something if it's going to make everyone sicker. Because I've witnessed that more than a few times. So, you want to be a grief guardian, but also a bedside guardian too, to make sure that people are protected. They don't need to be harangued by an angry ex-wife after 50 years, that kind of thing. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that when you're in a space of bereavement, what you really need is a place for your bereavement, a container kind of is sort of pop culture talk. But what it means is, for me, it's setting up an altar space. That might be in a tiny corner. It might be on a table. It may be at your entrance, in which you've got candles, you've got beautiful flowers or shells or anything from the earth that also symbolizes transitions. If we walk on a beach, what do we see in shells? We see death everywhere, everywhere, because that's what life and death is. It's a constant spiraling in and out, and it's a constant life and death dance. So, bringing in all of the earth that you can. And a lot of people will bring in like dried mushrooms and dried flowers and grass and rocks and anything. So you've got that, but also a photograph of the person. Maybe it's a certificate of that person's life. Maybe that person became a volunteer of the year. Have that up there. Have everything up there you can. Whatever it is that brings forth healing for you as the person who loved deeply and still is loving. Because again, a body may pass away, but a relationship continues. And be really, really in love with that relationship that continues.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Say that again. The body may pass. Say it again. Yeah.
Okay. So a body may pass away, but the relationship continues.
Yes.
And so when we've lost our babies, we still have that relationship with that child. Whether or not the child is inside our body or not, doesn't matter. That soul made a connection. So that relationship is continuing. Mm-hmm. And I remind people of that because, in the Rudolf Steiner world, the Waldorf world, they teach a bereavement path where you just continue to talk to the spirit of the person as if that person is still there, and don't even worry about it. One man, to manage his grief after 25 years, continued to read at night to his daughter in her room, whether she was there or not, in the physical form or corporeal form, did not matter. He was continuing to do the reading. That was a ritual of healing for him. And eventually he stopped doing the reading because he felt she didn't need it anymore. Maybe he didn't need it anymore. But whatever it was all of those years of healing, and he would do the reading, he'd read the book, whatever it might be, or the chapter, and then he'd go about his life. Others say, talk to the dead. I do. I talk to all my ancestors because they're all still there. So a really cool thing about my great aunt. So as she was getting closer to death, she was always open to the spirit world, always. And she lived less than a block from the cemetery. And she would tell me that she'd say, well, they're walking through again, just like it's a mall. And she talked about it and I said, well, Aunt Dale, I wonder if those are souls coming back, And she said, I think so. But it's interesting that one of the souls that kept finding her in her dreams was an older, like a great, 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 great aunt type she finally said to me, she said, I figured out finally who that person was. And she had lost her children young, apparently. But she had been there sort of knocking on the existence to say, hey, There's people on the other, there's people out there who know you, who knew you way before you came. And she found comfort in that.
Yeah, that's so true. I know I've even known people who felt like, they were connected with a loved one. Like this one woman I'm thinking of, it was her mother, that she felt connected to her mother. But then actually when her mother died was when she was like, now she felt like an extra layer of closeness in a way that she wasn't anticipating. She thought she would feel more separate, and yet she actually felt closer to her mother.
Yes, yes. Because one seer who, a really old gentleman, 101, he was talking about how, the veil is so thin, but, really, truly, it's just a breath of time. And when my friend Gary was killed on the news story, I had some video of him before they were trying to take off in the chopper and after the explosion and the crash. But I noticed that I could rewind for just a split second and Gary was still alive. And then forward a millisecond and he was gone. And that's the veil to me. It is so slight. And so if we have memorial altars for our loved ones, if we're talking to them, if we're looking for the signs, all of which I've seen, Cassandra, for instance, was a hummingbird person. It was her spirit animal, and for more than one reason, right? And then, so in her favorite color was this kind of rose pink. Well, the day I was going to give a talk to the Final Passages group about her life and how we helped her with her transition, I opened the door and there in front of one of the bushes, one of my bushes, was this beautiful hummingbird with a pink throat just hovering. I mean, standing in almost like if this hummingbird had feet, it was standing right on the porch, just hovering with a kind of a smile. I mean, this was a happy bird. And I thought, Cassandra's speaking to us and blessing us on this day. And in the old days, in the ancient times, in the Greco-Roman times of classical antiquity, the ancient Greeks believed that blue butterflies visiting them was a soul of their loved one coming back to say hello. Mm-hmm. So, in all of this age of reason and science, it's kind of cool in its own way, but let's not forget the beauty and the magic of life and death and how tremendously numinous it is. And that's a kind of word. I use the word numinous and numinosity. It's about the sacred, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a religious thing, right? Numinous is awe of nature. I mean, we can stand at the Grand Canyon and feel its numinosity, right? And we don't need a religious doctrine. It's just really sacred because it's that awe and that connection. So, there's so many ways that we can be in this world where we don't have to fit into a box with our grieving and our death. And that's our work. And I hope your work too, because we're going to bring you in on this because we need you.
Yeah, I would be honored.
Yeah, yes. We would be honored too.
What else are you feeling like inspired about right now in the realm of death and grief? Is there anything else you'd like to name here as we move towards our thing? Yeah.
I'm really excited about plant medicine use at the end of life and helping alleviate pain. I'm grateful that we have medical cannabis that we can use with CBD for really worn out bodies. And, the pain that comes with dying can be very physical and very, musculoskeletal. So you really sort of need that help. So I'm really grateful for expansiveness in this kind of holistic medicine. And that would include also psychedelics and hallucinogens that can be used with a medical model, or at least one that you really can trust. All of these help people with a kind of soul dive that we're able to have some exploration and spaciousness and expansiveness around prior to death. So a lot of that kind of therapy happening in the nation and world now. So that I'm inspired about. I'm inspired about Final Passages in Sebastopol, California, which was led and founded by Jerry Grace Lyons, who at the same time in the 90s that she was building Final Passage, Zenith Virago at Byron Bay, Australia, New South Wales, is actually, it's the same upwelling. Both of these incredible women, Zenith Virago of Australia, Jerry Grace Lyons of America, both of these women, almost the same year, they started their work as doulas and end-of-life midwives. And this was from very divergent backgrounds. I think that Zenith was a paralegal, and I'm not sure where Jerry Grace was in her life. She may have been in her catering business. Whatever she was doing, it wasn't being called as a kid as I was. But this upwelling happened because they both lost friends and both saw how difficult death and dying was in America. So they started nonprofits and charities, and they started training people how to be doulas. And I was trained by both of these exceptional souls. And I live for both of them, really, to be honest. I'm in love with both of them. Zenith is coming here in August, and I'm trying to get Jerry Grace to come to my home also around the Day of the Dead, perhaps in November, end of October. So anyway, I used to be on the core council at Final Passages, and that's finalpassages.org. Check it out. And Jerry Grace does tons of trainings all the time. And she has a phenomenal team of healers all the time coming in and out of the program. I served on the core council 4 or 5 years, I think. And then Zenith, I did a training with her in 2018 in Seattle, and now she's coming back. First weekend in August, August 1 through 4, 2024, Olympia, Washington, Death Walker, Olympia.
Here, I can just share the little thing of Zenith.
There she is.
You see it there? Yeah. Beautiful.
So Death Walker Olympia, August 1 through 4, 2024. And if you want to sign up, just go right on our website, which is deathwalkerolympia.com.
Great.
And it's awesome. We do payment plans, and we're really easy to work with. So
beautiful. I'll include links in the show notes as well for both of those, Final Passages and the Death Walker training. And I would love to also circle back. So you mentioned psychedelics and end of life, and this is something that I have also been curious about and heard some other people speak to. Is this mainly in like final days, weeks, or is it something that's occurring earlier on for people? I
think people are coming to it when they come to it. Mm-hmm. Some folks are in their 30s or 40s, and they've had death fears and phobias, maybe. Mm-hmm. But so they want to grapple with their experience, connection to, or disconnection with death. So they want to actually become more cohesive with death in its own way. And what they've done with both ketamine and like mushroom therapy, which would be psilocybin therapy. And I really, really recommend you go with a guide and don't do anything on your own ever. Not ever. It's too much. It's too much. And it's also, we're here to be with each other. Let's work together on this. So get a guide, or I look for therapists or people who are licensed, because I want people who are hugely responsible when I'm working with like the unconscious and the psyche. I'm a graduate of Pacifica Graduate Institute. That's where I went to get my PhD. And that is Depth Psychology Central. So it's about the soul and the psyche working together, the soul and psyche together, not just about brains and medicine. It's about the whole human psyche. And so when I work with people at the end of life, I'm working with their unconscious, because the unconscious is bubbling up more and more. And when people are crossing over, the unconscious is really present, if not omnipresent, because consciousness is giving way a little bit. Not always. It'll come back and forth. But when my great aunt Dale was dying, she was in and out of consciousness and whatnot. But the day, it was the morning of her death, I said that my mother had died, because my mom died 7 days before my great aunt died. I mean, it was like losing 2 giants in 1 week. It was unbelievable. And so I told my great aunt, I said, she just kind of came into consciousness for a minute. She said, "Oh, hi." And I said, "My mom died." And she said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." And she held my hand and then went right into the dying process again. But she was able to do that She was incredible. She died with a smile on her face. She really did. She had a strong faith, an openness. She was into the unconscious a lot in terms of study. I read Kubler-Ross's On Death and Dying when I was 10 years old at her house. So she was always fascinated with the unconscious and how much it's liberated at the end of life. So it's
Wow.
really an exceptional experience.
Yeah.
I've heard people talk in the crossing languages that their family said, no, they never spoke that in waking life. I've seen the room change completely from the lighting to the, sort of the sacredness of the room. It just becomes lit, almost sun-drenched in its own way. Beams of light hit certain things that are meaningful. I mean, it's like there's magic in the room. The sacred is in the room. It's just opening up. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And can you share with people how they can work with you or how they find you if they want to follow you or learn more
Okay.
from you?
So I'll give you my information and you can put it on the link
Yeah.
page. But so because I've never had a website, and I'll tell you why I don't have a website, because I can't serve the people who come to me now almost. And I knew I started to put a website up, and that was the first week when I said, I'm in the doula world now. I'm now able to help. I've been trained enough and I'm now able to help you. And I was full up within 5 days. So,
Wow.
yeah. So what I know is that when something's your calling, you have to answer it. You don't call out to it. So it's like, and now I'm working with an 85-year-old woman, and a new 87-year-old woman came to me, all by word of mouth, and it's all meant to be. See,
Perfect.
and that way I have to, well, plus, and I mean, one of my good friends is a doula who's got a big media presence. She spends so much time on her website, her Facebook account, her Instagram. I mean, and her website is huge. And it's like, I just don't want that work to do. I want to be able to be at the bedside and not fight with my image and protocol and all of this, and I wanted to say that one of the reasons I left news, television news in particular, was that I believed it was re-traumatizing people by the way the news was covered. And when my best friend being killed, yeah. But I wanted to say one thing about that moment. I had actually been spending about a year with hospice patients as a news reporter to do my series, which was Celebration of Life, a 5-part series. And so my friend was killed on the weekend, and I'm on camera as a guest journalist at that time because I wasn't the weekday anchor. So I was invited there to introduce the series. So I'm introducing this series about life and death and, how we deal with each other in grief and how we manage the dying in our nation. And I was introducing that, within 48 hours of his death. So, when you're called to death, you're called to it no matter what. And I think to myself, that's why I was really at that TV station. I was really there to help around all of this, And so I think if there's anything I want to leave people with, it's don't turn away from death, turn toward death and sit with death in your mind and say, what's coming into my heart right now? If it's fear of your children, fear for your children, fear for your spouse, fear to lose that cat you've been spending your life with for 22 years. We lost our cat after 20. And that was a huge loss. And so, no matter what it is, sit with it so you become familiar with it. And if you want to journal or write about it or do a video journal, whatever medium works for you to give yourself a dance with death. I embraced death. I said, you're my friend. And I think too, I mean, I'm superstitious, I know, and I'm a weirdo and I'm a mythologist and stuff, You know what I mean? It's like I live in sort of a lot of interesting spaces, right? But, the reason I do live in that interesting space is because it is fascinating and because it's legitimate, authentic, and real. And I've been called a weirdo, Morticia. I mean, millions of things. I was shamed as a kid, like you can't believe, because I was walking around with bones. I was like, look at the cool bone I found, because I loved it because it was a remnant of life, you know?
Yes.
So anyway,
Beautiful.
that's just my pitch for the day, is that you get to know death as your friend. When you invite death in as a friend, it's very different than when you run from it as if it's an enemy or a demon.
Yes, yes. What a great thing to close with. Thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you for this invitation. It's been so beautiful, and getting to know you in a deeper way has been really a gift. Thank you.
Yes, I'm excited to see you in August.
I can't wait to see you in August.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Heart of the Soul. You can support this podcast by donating to it using the PayPal or Venmo links found in the show notes below. If you have stories that you would like to share on my show, please send me an email through my website. I would love, love, love to hear from you. If you would like to work with me one-on-one, please check out my current offerings on birthingnova.love. If you're listening on Spotify, you can now send me a voice message through the link at the bottom of the show notes. Until next time, remember to be brave, be love, be wild, be you, and be the change that you seek for yourself and for the generations to come. Love, 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 love you. Mwah!